The short and dirty answer to the question of why is anime weird is because everything is weird contextually. Anime isn't weird to me at all because I'm incredibly more used to anime than I am to anything else. It would be really hard for you to show me an anime and for me to be like, oh, that's weird, and not just like recognize it immediately. On the other hand, plenty of stuff that is objectively infinitely more normal than anything I do, like for instance eating bugs, is flabbergastingly weird to me, and even to most of the people in my country, which accounts for far too little of the global population for anything in our weird ass country to be considered normal. Having said that, even in the United States, anime is considered pretty weird. And I know that it's not just because of cultural differences, because anime is also considered pretty weird in Japan, where it comes from. Unlike sushi, which Americans are always either completely afraid of or eating it all the time, anime is something that most US fans tend to sort of dip their toes in, maybe get to their calves in, and then usually they end up forgetting about it when they finish school or they aren't around somebody who's all in on it anymore. Hardcore anime fans in the US tend to be more so a part of the smaller global online community of English-speaking fans for whom the homeland Japan is treated as a kind of mecca or eventually becomes home. There aren't a lot of people who love both anime and America as much as I do. I think anime fans in the US have historically been more self-conscious over their interest in the media thanks to a lack of blanket understanding of just what the hell anime is prior to the global success of Pokemon, and the generational appreciation of shows like Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, Naruto, and so on and so forth. Anime didn't really have a reason to think about what would be considered weird in cultures outside Japan until it started making money overseas, and the ability to do that has remained highly contextual for anime. Still, it's fair to say at this point that anime has clicked on a level where everyone on Earth who is old/young enough to be participating in culture is aware, at least on some level, of the concept of anime. Nevertheless, it remains that the anime which have become incredibly successful are indeed incredibly weird. Not in the sense that they come from an unknown or foreign sensibility, but in the sense that the stuff that we have come to accept as a culture as a result of exposure to the arts is fucking insane. Everyone has knowledge and experience that they take for granted, which is completely alien to many of the people around them. My dad seems like a normal person until he starts talking about the San Francisco 49ers as though he is a part of their collective consciousness, referring to the team with the royal we like he is their king. This is actually such common behavior amid sports fans that it's taken as a relatively normal and accepted part of that culture, which everyone who doesn't do it thinks is weird behind their backs. I think the metric for whether something is broadly considered weird mostly comes down to whether it's something your family quietly worries about and tries to subtly lead you away from, or if it's something that they feel the need to confront you about and kick you out of the house over. Anime is still kind of in the middle right now, but it's definitely closer to the polite side of the cultural outrage spectrum in the United States, mostly because the actually weird stuff is way too weird for teenage kids to get caught with. You need an amount of sneakiness to reach a certain depth of weird experiences. At its very weirdest, anime is no weirder than film, literature, illustration, or any other type of art that is incredibly weird, albeit everything that is especially weird is weird in its own specific way. But maybe the weirder thing about anime is how much of it is weird in exactly the same way. I keep returning to Demon Slayer in my mind as I'm writing this script, because it is the most popular anime like ever made, and by far the most pervasive influence on the currently youngest generation of anime fans, as evidenced by how often I see kids wearing the iconic outfits of this show in public. I'm not even sure how many of these kids even know about the concept of cosplay. They're just wearing the clothes because they've seen Demon Slayer, and they see it as a natural part of what exists in the world, rather than a sudden emergence of a cultural tour de force. It makes sense to consider Demon Slayer the most normal anime that exists right now, in the sense that it's the most normalized to the zeitgeist of how people understand reality, and not by suggesting that anything actually portrayed in the anime is normal in the way that, like, Yuru Camp, aside from the big eyes and colorful hair, is dedicated to very deliberately presenting normalcy, even as it acknowledges how the act of camping, while normalized and culturally well accommodated for, isn't actually normal. I don't think Demon Slayer could have been successful if it wasn't a weird story full of vivid images and ideas, but I also think that its realization is based on the normalization of most of what it has to show in the context of manga, which have been published in the same magazine from which it originated, Weekly Shonen Jump, over the course of more than half a century. I can't look at Demon Slayer, especially with a title like Demon Slayer, and see it as much more than a very slightly new coat of paint on a lot of cliched ideas from manga new and old. But that unique look is also what drew an audience towards the story who wasn't drawn to any of the styles that had already existed in the medium. If Demon Slayer had been made to look like an 80s property, it might have had a shot with people nostalgic for that art style, but it likely wouldn't have made a splash with younger audiences, because it wouldn't have acknowledged what is currently normal in the path of aesthetic evolution. Demon Slayer might be Shonen Jump du jour, but it's the one that's dressed in something a Billie Eilish fan would wear. Even still, what I call Shonen Jump du jour is actually the amalgamation of what were once very weird ideas in what were once considered very weird stories before I consumed them and internalized them as something normal. I think we can all remember the first time we ever saw JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and thought it was the most insane thing ever published. But by the time you're past the universe resetting and you've seen a bunch of stuff influenced by JoJo in its wake, you start thinking things like, oh man, Yu-Gi-Oh! Clearly borrowed a lot of its aesthetic from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, instead of, oh, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has the most ridiculous character designs I've ever seen in my fucking life. I was immediately bored with Demon Slayer because I hate the cliche of killing the main character's mom in the first episode, relying entirely on the audience's feelings about moms in general to make us feel something about what is usually an incredibly vapid character, as in this case. I'd already experienced this disconnect with the huge reaction to Eren's mom dying that people had with Attack on Titan, and after Demon Slayer I started giving writers the advice of kill the mom at the start if you want to hit series as a joke. In fact, I've got a whole video about it now. But if you're like 12 and you've never actually seen a violent cartoon, hell, maybe not even seen The Walking Dead or like any scary movies or anything, and then you see this kid's mom get eaten by zombies, and now he's got to travel with his zombie sister and search for a cure, I can see how that would hit. Anime is weird because the people who make anime are fucking weird. Artists are weird. People are weird. Anything anyone does that isn't something you just expect everyone to do is weird. That weirdness is the explorational realm in which evolutionary science takes place. These are either the weirdnesses that get us kicked out or reinserted into the gene pool. Right now, anime is on a major come-up from Forever Alone / convention orgy weird to fashion inspiration and online friend meetup weird. Depending on what anime you're into, that is. Obviously, the difference between weird people and not weird people is how capable they are from keeping their weirdness out of everyone else's way. Anime is a pretty inoffensive thing to be interested in, but it can be very easy to find an offensive way of being into anime, and anime fans are very good at finding those. I think it's noble that anime fans have tended to strive towards normalization and expansion of the tribe, but I also think that anime fans need to take some responsibility and recognize that if you can't accept yourself and your weirdness enough to keep it out of everyone else's business, then you might need to assess if you really think it's okay to be yourself. It's easy enough to be infinitely weird inside your head and infinitely normal in the presence of others, and the weirdness of anime is often a sort of soothing way to offload the discomfort of your own weirdness by realizing how someone else is even fucking weirder. If you think anime is weird or normal or is getting more normal or should or shouldn't be normalized, let me know in the comments, and never forget, anime forever.